Welcome to How to Cook That. I'm Ann Reardon and this is another episode of Debunking where we look at viral videos from around the internet and figure out what's true and what is fake. First of all, before we get into it, I must say a huge thank you to all of you who helped with the fractal wood burning video. If you missed it, I did a previous episode exposing the extreme dangers of fractal wood burning, and YouTube in its crazy wisdom decided that that video was dangerous and took it down, while leaving up the videos showing how to do fractal wood burning. We of course challenged it and the decision got reversed, the video got put back up, but that essentially made that video dead in the water. No one was ever going to see it. But you guys got onto that, you commented on the video, you shared it, you liked it, you got it moving again, and now it is back on the front page when you search for fractal wood burning, and it is having an effect. Here are some of the comments just from since it's been reinstated. My dad was very insistent on wanting to do this and he wouldn't listen until I showed him this video. I am so glad you just saved my life. I was already making my device to try it, but changed my mind thanks to your video. I just threw everything away. I rewatched the video and had just decided to send it to my family member. Unbeknown to me, they already had the transformer and were planning on attempting it. And there are so many more comments just like that of these people saying they were going to try it, and now that they've seen the video and they realise how dangerous it is, they are not going to do it. And that is all because of you. So well done, great job, and thank you for your help with getting that warning out there. Now, let's have a look at what 5 Minute Crafts has been up to. This video is called Granny's Kitchen Hacks You Should Save for the Future. Speaking of the future though, can you imagine someone watching this video in 100 years time saying back in 2022 it appears they used to decorate their fridge with food instead of eating the food? To be fair though, I have decorated the fridge with food before, but I didn't smear it on. I made a chocolate tree so that the kids could see it when they came home from school. It was a completely different idea, but still decorating the fridge with food. Okay, let's look at this next one. We have some raspberry jam. Spread it on a paper towel, add soil, roll it up and plant it, and you grow a raspberry plant. To get jam to set, when you're making it, you have to heat it all the way up to 105 degrees Celsius or 220 Fahrenheit. Now, there's a variation for different seeds as to what temperature will kill them, but generally anything above 60 degrees centigrade, your seed's going to be dead. So it's not going to be viable anymore. It's not going to grow into a raspberry plant. So that one was completely fake. Let's check out this next one. They appear to have an onion in some soil, and they're cutting off the top, scoring it across, and then adding toothpicks, and now they're growing, and they seem to have miraculously been cut all the way through into quarters, and we can watch them grow, and now it's flowering with tulips. Okay, so I apparently got that wrong. That was not supposed to be an onion, it was supposed to be a tulip bulb. But what they showed in this video, the time lapse of this video, everything about this video was faked. If you have a look at the time lapse bit of it, you can see where they poured on the water. If we go frame by frame, you can see the water is soaking in as the frames go by. So no time has passed, just a few seconds. And in that time, they've stretched up or photoshopped in some leaves growing. I'm not quite sure why they didn't make the biggest one of those grow there, because that would have been more believable. Despite the fact that this is fake and it's the wrong methodology, you can actually propagate some bulbs like tulips and daffodils by cutting them all the way through, as long as you have some of that basil plate on the bottom of each bit that you've cut. There's a great YouTube channel that I want you to check out where he does some amazingly beautiful time lapses of daffodils opening and all of that sort of stuff. I'm not going to show you because I want you to go to his channel and watch them. But one of the time lapses that he has recorded is of slicing the bulbs. And you can see here as they grow, they look very, very different to what 5 Minute Crafts showed you. It doesn't make sense to me that beautifully filmed channels like this one that are factually correct and actually help educate you hardly get any views or subscribers, and yet 5 Minute Crafts continues to get millions of views and be promoted. This one, I thought that they were debunking the video for me. They'd already debunked it. But when I read the description and the comments underneath, I realized that they were genuinely posting up a video asking what they did wrong and why it didn't work. So let me show you the video. On the left is the original and on the right is the person trying it at home. They're blending sugar and food colouring to make cotton candy. And of course they just get powdered sugar mixed with some chunks of food colouring in there. If you're a regular to how to cook that, then you already know that to make cotton candy, it is indeed just sugar and food colouring, but it has to be heated up until the sugar is melted, and then a cotton candy machine has a round central section with small little holes so that when it's spun you get these tiny little threads of sugar coming out rather than the sugar just splattering everywhere when it's melted, which would not make cotton candy at all. But if we read down in the comments, some people are suggesting perhaps they've got the wrong blender, or you need to blend for longer, or maybe a different speed. My suggestion would perhaps be to put the cotton candy in the blender and then reverse the footage and you've magically got it making fairy floss. There shouldn't be fake hacks and there shouldn't be fake how-tos. It's not a matter of trying to prank people with recipes. That's just going to waste food and waste their time and make them think that they've done something wrong and that they can't cook. That's not a good outcome. Perhaps there needs to be a trust rating on videos that can be trusted so that you know if I try their stuff, they're not trying to prank me. I don't know. You let me know what you think a good solution would be to this problem. Next topic we have is highly controversial.
Vaping.
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 Vaping. Nobody knows too much about it.
Basically, they're a device that uses a battery to heat up a metal coil to 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius in seconds in order to convert a liquid into tiny airborne droplets or an aerosol. And most of the liquids contain nicotine. Some of them contain THC or other cannabis or marijuana products, but we're not talking about those. I'm just talking about the nicotine vapes and nicotine e-cigarettes for the purpose of this video. The first e-cigarettes looked very much like normal cigarettes. They were designed by a pharmacist who was addicted to smoking and wanted a way to still get that nicotine hit, but to try and get himself off smoking and hopefully others too. So great starting intentions. Fast forward to today, and as I said, there's hundreds of different designs, many of which are more modern and sleek and colourful, and 23% of adults who use e-cigarettes never smoked in the first place. They just took up e-cigarettes and vaping. So is it good for you, or are they not so good for you? Let's take a look at the first thing that hits the news a lot, which is exploding e-cigarettes.
An e-cigarette exploded inside a New York City man's pocket.
Was smoking an electronic cigarette. It exploded in his face.
It's the latest e-cigarette to explode in a long list of similar cases across the country.
Do you remember when the Samsung phone batteries were exploding? In those cases, 26 people got injured, and then the phones were recalled, taken off the market, millions of them, so that no one else got hurt. In this case, we have 3,369 injuries from e-cigarettes exploding. A third of the cases of hospitalisation, the people were using the e-cigarette when it exploded, and then of course they're getting burns and injuries to their face and to their hands. Because of the design of the e-cigarette, when the batteries are exploding, it's forcing the top of the e-cigarette off into their face like a projectile. So if you look at this CT scan of a 17-year-old, you can see his jaw is shattered and his teeth are knocked in. These are not minor injuries. These are major, unpleasant. Nobody would wish that on anyone. So why are they exploding? Well, I've seen quite a few people say that it is because people are carrying spare batteries in their pocket.
They have a wrap on the outside that needs to stay intact. If that battery gets torn and that starts to touch metal or something like loose change in your pocket or something like that, it can definitely short out the battery.
In a world where YouTube exists, if you tell people lithium-ion batteries are going to explode if you short circuit them, there's going to be YouTubers who try and short circuit them and get them to explode. Now, this is an extremely dangerous thing to do, and I do not at all suggest that you try it. But when they did try it, this is what happened.
Immediately dropped the battery into the acrylic pipe. And guess what happened after 20 minutes? Nothing. Well, it got pretty hot. but nothing more happened.
And those results seemed consistent over all the channels that I watched of people trying to short circuit the batteries. They got hot, but they didn't get hot enough for them to explode. So in order to try and make them get those fireworks, what was required to do that? Well, on those dangerous YouTube videos, anything that basically pierced through the battery, making the layers that are wrapped up inside the battery come in contact with each other. So you're basically breaking the separation plates so that the layers come in contact with each other, and then you're getting the explosion. Now, I'm pretty sure that that's not happening in people's pockets. So why would they be exploding? One of the explanations is possibly faulty lithium-ion batteries, so people getting cheap, substandard batteries that actually have a fault inside them already, and then that just causes that separation layer that's inside the battery to break down, and boom, you have an explosion. But then there's other ones as well where it seems to be the fault of the device. This vaping channel says
it's not the mod's fault. It is definitely the user's fault whenever one of these things happens to explode.
So he's saying that by using mech mods and the wrong coil, people are essentially overstressing the battery and allowing it to overheat that way and then explode. My question to that would be, if mech mods are so dangerous that they can explode like this, surely there should be an awful lot of warnings that have to come with them in order for the people not to get sued. This law firm that is in fact representing different people who have been injured in explosions lists different devices that have been involved in explosions. Obviously this is not all devices because it's only just what one law firm is representing. Personally, I just wouldn't risk putting anything that could explode that close to my face. The next thing that hits the news a lot is EVALI.
EVALI, which stands for e-cigarette or vaping product use associated lung injury.
We're seeing it progress pretty rapidly from no problems to severe lung injury and even death in just a week or so.
EVALI was very serious. It killed a lot of people, 68 people to be exact. It mainly occurred in the US back in 2019. If I show you the graph here, you can see that it really peaked and then it dropped right back down. And the reason it dropped back down is they started studying the lungs of people who came into the hospital with EVALI and found that the vast majority of them had not just been smoking the nicotine e-cigarettes, but they had been smoking the THC or the cannabinoid or the marijuana-based vapes basically, and they had been contaminated or deliberately added to the vitamin E acetate, which fine if you're going to eat that, not fine if you're going to inhale that. It basically is an extreme irritant to the lungs, causing them to swell, and that inflammation then meant that they basically couldn't breathe properly. Before we move on to the next thing, I just want to say a big thank you to today's sponsor. If you are really, really busy in your week, like I have been this week, and you don't have enough time to do meal prep and go to the shops and do your food shopping, then HelloFresh delivers right to your doorstep. Each box contains quality, fresh produce, easy to follow recipe cards, and all the ingredients that you need for each recipe come pre-portioned to decrease food waste. It's perfect for busy families looking to try something new, and yes, they do have vegetarian and pescatarian options too if you want that. The meals were plenty big enough for my hungry boys to eat. Go to hellofresh.com and use code COOKTHAT16 for 16 free meals across 7 boxes and 3 free gifts. Now onto the huge issue of young people taking up vaping. This is a speech from the US Surgeon General back in 2018.
We know that nicotine exposure during adolescence can uniquely harm the developing adolescent brain, impacting learning, memory, and attention. we know that exposure during this critical brain period can lead to further addictions. E-cigarette use has skyrocketed, so much so today that I am officially declaring e-cigarette use among youth an epidemic in the United States.
Vaping companies, many of which have full or part ownership by tobacco companies, basically had a free run in the US up to 2016 when the FDA was given approval to be able to regulate them under tobacco. So before that, they could pretty much do what they wanted. There was no labeling requirements for nicotine. There was 7,000 different flavors. They basically just did anything and loved the freedom, because tobacco companies had had a lot of restrictions on what they could do before that in terms of advertising. Now they've got this new product and they can do whatever they want. Even once the regulations came in 2016 in terms of the FDA could regulate them, it seemed to be very slow in actually knuckling down on those regulations and requiring companies to actually have their products tested and approved before they were allowed on the market. I'm not sure why that was so slow. You'd have to look into that if you were interested in that, but certainly that allowed the numbers of youth who were using e-cigarettes to continue to rise. So by 2020, 20% of high schoolers in the US said that they had used an e-cigarette within the last 30 days. 20%. That is just high, super high, way too high. And then because of that, there were some investigations, particularly into one of the brands that was the leading brand at the time, to see had they in fact marketed towards youth and young people, which they deny and say, no, our target audience was smokers. We want to get smokers off smoking and onto e-cigarettes, which is a great, noble thing to try and do. But when you look at it, the average age of smokers, or the majority of smokers in the US, are between the age of 25 and 65. And their adverts all seem to feature people who are quite a bit younger, or definitely on the very youngest end of that. And it wasn't just the young people who were featured in this campaign that was the issue, it was where the ad was placed.
So you had ads in teen magazines, you had ads on children's cartoon websites. It's no wonder this product appealed to young people so much.
They also paid many social media influencers to promote their product. It's interesting to note on this one that was a paid promotion that she has updated her post to say, I became addicted to Juul vape and it caused me lots of pain. But probably the nail in the coffin for Juul when they were trying to convince everyone they hadn't promoted to kids was the testimony that they had actually gone into schools.
Did the presenter call Juul quote unquote totally safe more than once?
Yes.
What impact did those quote unquote totally safe comments have on your classmates, some of whom may have already started vaping?
For my classmates who were already vaping, it was a sigh of relief because now they were able to vape without any concern.
The National Academies of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine put out a 750-page review on e-cigarettes. This is what they say. Combustible tobacco cigarettes pose serious risks to human health. We know that. I think everyone would agree on that. If you smoke, you have a 50% chance of dying of a smoking-related illness. That's not good odds. Many of those health effects emerge only after decades of cigarette smoking. E-cigarettes have only been on the market in the US since 2006, making scientific comparisons between e-cigarettes and combustible cigarettes about most health effects difficult. More and better research on short-term and long-term health effects of e-cigarettes will bring clarity on whether e-cigarettes will prove to reduce harm or induce harm at the individual and population levels. So I guess it's kind of like watch this space. If you're someone who never smoked and you are now vaping, welcome to the human experiment. You've volunteered to pay money to vape and get paid nothing to be the research subject in this great human experiment. Personally, I would rather be in the control group that gets to have healthy fresh air, and I think you should swap into my group. I think you've got a bad deal there. Nicotine is highly addictive.
It was so addicting. I brought it with me everywhere I went.
At first, it started out as a pod a day, but then progressively it got to more and more. At the height of my addiction, it was $150 a week.
So I'm constantly puffing away on it. When I'm in bed, about to go to sleep, I'm smoking on it until my eyes are closed and I'm in a deep sleep. I wake up. The first thing in the morning I do is reach for this.
Now, previously, back when they were trying to show that normal tobacco cigarettes caused lung cancer, they developed a study where they would get 300 mice, put them in an enclosed pen and pump in cigarette smoke for, I think it was 5 or 6 hours a day, and they did that 5 days a week, and they did it for 2.5 years. And they also had a control group of mice who got nice, fresh, filtered air. At the end of the study, 10% of the control group had neoplastic lung lesions. Now that compared with 45% of the mice that were exposed to the cigarette smoke. Now this testing method has been useful because whenever the tobacco companies come up with a new cigarette that they think is going to be healthier, instead of waiting decades, you could do this study and show whether it was going to have a better effect compared to the previous model of cigarettes. Now obviously this is mice, this is not humans, so it's not 100%, but it at least gives an indication. You don't have to wait 30, 40 years before you get that sort of indication of what's happening. So this professor wanted to do that study essentially with nicotine vapes, but he hit opposition because it's widely believed that nicotine is not carcinogenic, it's not going to cause cancer, but he was looking at what about when it's inhaled. This is a whole new delivery method. So eventually he got some funding, but not big funding, so he didn't have 300 mice, he had 40 mice, and he exposed them to e-cigarette vapor containing nicotine for 4 hours a day, 5 days a week for just over a year. And then 18 mice were exposed to e-cigarette vapor without nicotine, and 18 were given filtered air. 1 of the mice in the control group got cancer, and 9 of the mice that were exposed to the nicotine-containing vapor developed 1 or more visible lung tumours. Here is the professor who did that study.
Vaping definitely is not safe. Nicotine, once it gets into the cell, they become DNA damaging agent.
Of course, nicotine is not the only chemical that has been raised of concern in vapes either. There are issues with some of the flavourings, particularly the cinnamon, the butterscotch, the buttery, the cherry ones. Some of those are approved FDA flavourings that you can use in food and they're fine to eat, but when you're heating them up to 200 degrees centigrade, they're changing into a different chemical, often one which is then an irritant to your lungs when you breathe it in. There are also some reports saying that there are some heavy metals that are being inhaled from some of the vapes, perhaps from the coils in the actual devices. 30 countries have totally banned e-cigarettes. Here in Australia, they decided to do a study. They went out and bought 214 different vapes that were available from all different brands, and instead of just trusting what they said was in them, they tested the liquid that was in each vape and then had a look at what was actually in it. 88% of them were not correctly labelled for nicotine. Some of them didn't even mention they had any nicotine in them, but they in fact had very high levels of nicotine. Of course, that's not useful if you're trying to wean off and you don't even know how much is in it. And a third of them had prohibited substances in, like those flavourings that I was just talking about. So that told them that basically they can't trust the vape manufacturers to do the right thing for people's health. So they then made the decision to make it illegal to have nicotine vapes in Australia. It's illegal to possess one, it's illegal to use one, unless you have a prescription from your doctor. If you are vaping and you want to quit, which would be 60% of you according to studies, then make sure you do reach out and get help, because you are dealing with a nicotine addiction. Coming straight off at cold turkey can be pretty rough.
This is so I feel like I'm at war in my body. My throat hurts, my head hurts, I'm craving it.
Weaning off it with a plan from a health professional can make that journey a little bit easier. It is going to be hard. It's not going to be an easy thing to do, but it is so worth it. If you have never vaped before and you've never smoked before, if someone offers you one, just be kind to your future self and say, no thanks, I don't want to do that. That's not for me. Simple. If you don't start, I can 100% guarantee it won't affect you. You won't get addicted and you will not have any long-term health consequences from it. With thanks to my patrons for your amazing support, make it a great week by being kind to others, and I'll see you on Friday.